Picture the fantasy for a second. Rolling green fairways stretching toward a clubhouse with a wraparound porch. Members in white polos shaking hands over a scorecard. Your name on a small brass plaque by the 18th hole. Friends flying in for a weekend. Caddies carrying bags. A Sunday afternoon that ends with a bourbon on the veranda watching the sun drop behind the pines. That's the dream real estate brochures and country club marketing videos are built to sell you. Here's what those brochures don't show you. The irrigation pump that failed during the driest week of July. The Greens Committee meeting that turned into a shouting match over a $400,000 clubhouse assessment. The rainout that wiped out 14 tee times on a Saturday, your busiest day of the week. And the fact that across the country, thousands of golf courses have quietly closed over the last 2 decades because the math simply never worked. Owning a golf course is one of the most romanticized businesses in America, and also one of the most financially punishing. On the surface, it looks like prestige, leisure, and land. Underneath it, it's a business with some of the highest fixed costs per acre of any commercial real estate in the country, a revenue stream that evaporates the moment it rains, and a maintenance bill that never takes a day off, not even in winter, not even when the course is closed. Some golf courses make real money. Most don't, at least not from golf. And understanding the difference is the entire point of what follows. Before we get into numbers, we need to separate what owning a golf course actually means. Because like the word ranch, the word golf course covers several completely different businesses that happen to share fairways and flagsticks. A municipal course is owned by a city or county and run largely as a public amenity, often subsidized, rarely profitable in a pure sense. A daily fee or public course is privately owned, but open to anyone willing to pay, competing purely on price and course conditions. A semi-private course blends public play with a paying membership tier. A private club is member-owned or member-financed, funded through initiation fees and monthly dues rather than walk-up green fees. A resort course exists to sell an experience to travelers who will never set foot on it again, and prices accordingly. And then there's the real estate community course, a category that behaves nothing like the others, because its entire purpose is not to make money playing golf, but to make the houses around it worth more. These are not variations on one business. A daily fee course in Ohio competing for $40 rounds and a private equity-owned club in Florida charging 6-figure initiation fees might both be called golf courses. But their financial models have almost nothing in common. Biscript focuses primarily on the standard 18-hole course, whether public or private, while explaining where the other models diverge and why some of them are the only ones that actually work. Let's start with the ground itself. A regulation 18-hole golf course typically requires 150 to 200 acres, enough room for fairways, greens, tees, rough, hazards, cart paths, a clubhouse, and a maintenance compound. Land acquisition alone typically accounts for 40 to 50% of a course's total development budget. And depending on location, that swing is enormous. On rural land, far from a metro area, you might acquire the acreage relatively cheaply. Close to a growing suburb where a developer wants a golf course specifically to anchor a housing community, land costs climb fast because you're no longer paying agricultural or recreational value. You're paying proximity to buyer's value, the same distortion we see in expensive ranch country. Now, the build itself. A standard 18-hole course in 2025 typically costs somewhere between $5 million and $15 million to construct, with luxury, championship-caliber designs running $25 million or more. Break it down per hole and you're looking at roughly $450,000 on the low end for a modest layout with standard turf and conventional irrigation, climbing past $2 million per hole for premium turf species, elaborate water features, and championship-grade drainage. The single biggest line item inside that build after land is the greens complex. USGA spec putting greens require precisely engineered layers of sand, gravel, and drainage piping beneath the turf, designed so water percolates at an exact rate no matter how much rain falls on a given afternoon. Get that wrong and you're not fixing a cosmetic problem, you're re-excavating a green that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to build in the first place. Add professional design fees, which can run from $20,000 for a modest layout to $500,000 or more for a marquee architect's signature design, and the irrigation system alone, often the single most expensive mechanical system on the property, and a serious 18-hole build easily lands in the $8 to $20 million range before a single clubhouse wall goes up. Speaking of the clubhouse, that's a second construction project layered on top of the first. A modest clubhouse with a pro shop, locker rooms, and a grill room might run a few $100,000. A full-service private club facility with a formal dining room, banquet space, a fitness center, and a pool can push into the millions. Add a maintenance building to house the equipment fleet, cart storage, and charging infrastructure for anywhere from 60 to over 100 golf carts, and the practice facilities modern golfers now expect. A driving range, a short game area, putting greens, and you're deep into the kind of capital outlay that dwarfs almost any other small business you could open on the same acreage. So you've built it, or bought an existing course. You now own a very large, very manicured piece of turf. Before it produces a single dollar of sustainable revenue, you need to understand that this asset requires constant, expensive intervention just to stay in the condition golfers expect. And this is where new owners consistently underestimate what they've bought. The average annual maintenance cost for an 18-hole golf course in the United States runs about $810,000 a year, according to industry surveys of golf course superintendents. That figure splits meaningfully by course type. Municipal courses average around $621,000 annually. Daily fee public courses come in a bit lower, near $557,000. Private clubs, where members expect flawless conditions and are paying to get them, average over $1,080,000 a year. Break any of those numbers down by hole, and you're spending somewhere around $30,000 to $60,000 per hole, every single year, regardless of how many rounds get played on it. Labor is the largest piece of that budget by far, typically accounting for 57% of total maintenance spending. A public course generally runs a maintenance crew of 12 to 18 employees, including seasonal staff, while private clubs with higher standards and more acreage to manicure run crews of 18 to 25. At an average golf course maintenance wage of roughly $40,000 a year, that alone puts labor costs in the $350,000 to $630,000 range annually, depending on facility type. Fertilizer and pesticides, essential to keeping greens disease-free and fairways uniform, add roughly $73,000 a year for the average course. Equipment, mowers, aerators, sprayers, specialized greens rollers, accounts for another meaningful slice, and because this equipment runs constantly across acres of turf in all weather, replacement cycles are short and expensive. Then there's water, and this is where geography becomes destiny in almost exactly the way it does for ranching. About a quarter of American courses actually purchase their water rather than drawing from wells, ponds, or reclaimed sources. And for those that do, water accounts for roughly 13% of the maintenance budget, averaging $107,000 a year nationally. But that number swings wildly by region. In the arid Southwest, average water spending climbs to $238,000 annually. In Hawaii, total maintenance costs average $1.44 million a year, the highest in the country, driven heavily by water and labor. Courses in the Southwest average $1.05 million a year in maintenance overall. Meanwhile, courses in the north-central states with dramatically shorter growing seasons spend less on water and chemicals but also generate revenue for only 6 or 7 months of the year, because the course simply closes when snow covers the fairways. This is the golf course version of the ranch owner discovering that cheap grazing land in Wyoming demands 5 months of expensive hay feeding. The savings you find in one line item reappear as a cost somewhere else. Now, the revenue side, the part that has to work, and this is where golf reveals its own version of the ranch's central problem. Cost is fixed and constant. Revenue is variable and seasonal. On a public or daily fee course, revenue comes primarily from green fees, the amount a golfer pays per round. The national average green fee for an 18-hole round at a public course was $43 in 2023, though that number has been climbing, up roughly 29% since 2019, tracking close to overall inflation. Resort courses, selling a destination experience rather than a commodity round, have pushed further, with average resort green fees up around 37% over the same period, and more than half of American golf resorts now charging peak season rates above $100 per round. A typical daily fee course hosts somewhere around 30,000 to 31,000 rounds a year on an 18-hole layout, and spends between $13 and $17 per round on maintenance alone. Multiply 30,000 rounds by an average green fee in the low 40s and you get gross golf revenue somewhere around $1.2 to $1.3 million a year before you've paid a single maintenance worker, before pro shop staff, before insurance, before debt service on the 8-figure construction loan. Subtract that $557,000 to $621,000 maintenance budget, subtract labor for the clubhouse, cart fleet upkeep, insurance, utilities for the building itself, marketing, and property taxes, and the margin on pure green fee revenue narrows fast, especially on a course that was financed with any real debt. Private clubs operate on a completely different revenue architecture, and it's worth understanding why, because it's the mechanism that actually keeps most private courses solvent. Rather than charging per round, private clubs collect dues, initiation fees, and food and beverage minimums from a fixed membership base, regardless of how often any individual member plays. The typical private club generates only 19,000 to 20,000 rounds a year per 18 holes, fewer than a public course, roughly 60 rounds per membership annually. But the money isn't coming from the round itself, it's coming from the membership relationship. According to Club Benchmarking's 2025 data, the national average initiation fee across private clubs is roughly $60,000, up from about $29,000 in 2019, a 72% jump in 5 years. Top quartile clubs now see median initiation fees exceeding $100,000, and marquee clubs push far beyond that. Silverleaf in Scottsdale asks $400,000. The Apogee Club in Florida charges up to $650,000. And Augusta National's initiation, never officially published, is estimated by industry sources at $250,000. Annual dues on top of that typically run $5,000 to $25,000 at quality private clubs, with top quartile clubs averaging $14,000 to $22,000 a year, plus mandatory food and beverage minimums of $1,500 to $13,000 annually, whether or not the member ever eats there. Plus capital assessments, the line item that catches new members off guard most often. When a club needs to rebuild greens, renovate the clubhouse, or replace the irrigation system, it levies a special assessment directly on the membership, often $5,000 to $50,000 per member, depending on the scope of the project. And most club bylaws allow the board to approve these with limited member pushback. This is precisely how a private club, generating fewer rounds than a public course, still manages to spend over $1 million a year on maintenance alone. The golf itself is almost incidental to the cash flow. The membership relationship is the actual product. Which brings us to the core structural problem of running a golf course as a golf course. Separate from any real estate or tax angle, weather doesn't just raise your costs the way it does in ranching, it directly kills your revenue in real time. A rained-out Saturday isn't a delayed harvest you can sell next season. It's 14 tee times that will never be booked again, gone permanently, while the maintenance staff, the mortgage, the insurance premium, and the clubhouse utility bill keep running exactly as if the sun had been shining. A course in the upper Midwest might operate a full revenue season for only 6 or 7 months a year, closed under snow the rest of the time, while its property taxes, debt service, and baseline maintenance obligations continue on a 12-month clock. Compare that to a Sunbelt course that can generate revenue essentially year-round, but faces punishing summer water bills and turf stress that a northern course never has to manage. There is no version of course ownership where you escape a structural mismatch between when the money goes out and when it reliably comes in, and the industry's supply history proves just how thin these margins really are. Golf course construction boomed for roughly 2 decades before 2006, growing supply by about 44% nationally, driven heavily by real estate developers building courses to sell surrounding home lots rather than to run profitable golf operations in isolation. When that building boom cooled, the industry entered a sustained contraction, roughly 13% fewer courses since 2006, and those closures were not evenly distributed. They concentrated overwhelmingly among value-priced courses charging less than $40 a round, the exact segment with the thinnest margin between green fee revenue and the fixed cost of running the maintenance operation underneath it. Even now, with American golf enjoying a historic resurgence, more than 500 million rounds played nationally for 6 consecutive years running, and a record set again in 2025, the country still operates roughly 2,000 fewer golf courses than it did during the early 2000s peak. Demand came back strong. A meaningful chunk of the supply never did, because the courses that closed weren't victims of bad luck. They were victims of an operating model that could never generate enough margin per round to survive a bad stretch. So, if the pure golf operations math is this unforgiving, why do golf courses keep getting built? And why do some owners keep making real money? The answer, much like the ranch, has almost nothing to do with the sport itself. The first and oldest reason is the real estate loss leader model. A developer builds a golf course not expecting it to turn a standalone profit, but because a golf course view adds tens of thousands of dollars to every home lot sold around its perimeter. The course itself might run at a modest loss or a bare break-even for years, subsidized by a homeowners association or the developer directly, because the real profit was already captured the moment those surrounding lots sold at a premium. This is exactly why so many American subdivisions built during the pre-2006 boom have a golf course sitting at their center that nobody involved ever expected to be a great business on its own. The golf course was never the product. The houses around it were. The second reason is scale consolidation through private equity. Over the past decade, firms have systematically rolled up individual private clubs into large multi-property portfolios, capturing economies of scale on insurance, procurement, turf equipment, purchasing, and back-office management that a standalone club owner could never access. Apollo Global Management took what was then Club Corp private in 2017 for a $2.2 billion enterprise value, later rebranding the roughly 200-club portfolio as Invited. And reporting suggests Apollo has since explored a sale or public offering valuing the operator at more than $3 billion including debt. That same period saw Bain Capital agree to acquire golf and country club operator Concert Golf, and Leonard Green and Partners take a majority stake in Topgolf. None of these firms are betting on any single course's green fees. They're betting that a large enough network of member dues, initiation fees, food and beverage revenue, and shared operating costs across 200 properties produces a far more stable return than any individual 18 holes ever could alone. The third reason is the same tax and status logic that drives billionaire ranch ownership, just wearing a different uniform. An ultra-exclusive private club membership, the kind with a 6-figure initiation fee and a waiting list measured in years, isn't really selling golf. It's selling access, a network of decision-makers, an address that signals arrival. That's the entire economic engine behind clubs like Augusta National, where membership has never been about return on investment in any conventional sense. Let's build a realistic scenario for someone actually trying to run a standalone daily fee course as a business, not a real estate loss leader, not a private equity roll-up asset. Say you build a modest, public 18-hole course on 170 acres in a growing Sunbelt suburb. Land and site work runs $6 million. Course construction, standard turf, conventional irrigation. A modest clubhouse runs another $9 million. Add a maintenance building, an 80-cart fleet, and practice facilities. Call it another $1.5 million. Total capital deployed before opening day, roughly $16.5 million. Assume the buyer finances 70% of that at current commercial rates, landing annual debt service somewhere around $850,000 to $950,000 a year. Your first full year, you host 28,000 rounds. Slightly below the daily fee average because you're still building a local reputation, at an average green fee of $45. Gross golf revenue, $1,260,000. Add pro shop sales, cart fees, and a modest food and beverage operation. Call it another $300,000. Total revenue, roughly $60,000. Your maintenance budget, in line with the daily fee average, runs $570,000. Add clubhouse staff, insurance, property taxes, marketing, and utilities, another $400,000. Total operating costs before debt service, roughly $970,000. Net operating income before debt service, $590,000. Against $900,000 in annual debt service, you're running a real cash shortfall in year one. Exactly the pattern the industry data predicts, a course reaching genuine break-even only after several years of reputation-building push rounds played toward capacity. Assuming no major rainout season, no equipment failure, no capital assessment for a failing green. Now the bad year. A wet spring costs you 3,000 rounds you'll never recover. Each one a lost green fee that evaporates the moment the tee time passes. A hot, dry summer spikes your water bill by $40,000 above budget. A local competitor drops prices to fill their own tee sheet, forcing you to discount to stay competitive, trimming your average green fee to $40. Revised gross golf revenue, roughly $1,000. Add the same $300,000 in ancillary revenue, total revenue near $1,800,000. Maintenance costs rise slightly with the extra water spending to $610,000. Total operating costs before debt service climb to about $1,000. Net operating income before debt service, $290,000, less than half of your good year figure, against a $900,000 debt service obligation that doesn't care what the weather did. That gap, roughly $300,000, swinging to a $600,000 shortfall, is driven almost entirely by rounds played and water costs, two things weather controls far more than the owner does. The pattern that emerges across public courses, private clubs, resort properties, and real estate developments alike is the same one that shows up in ranching, in vineyards, in almost every land-based business that romanticizes ownership while quietly demanding brutal operating discipline underneath. The people who make real money from golf courses are rarely making it from the round itself. They're making it from the real estate that surrounds the fairways, from a membership model that collects revenue regardless of whether anyone plays, from operating at a scale that spreads fixed costs across dozens of properties, or from a status and network value that has nothing to do with turf conditions at all. The golf is the cover charge. The land, the membership base, or the surrounding real estate is what actually builds the wealth. Which means the honest answer to whether a golf course can make you rich is yes, it absolutely can, but very rarely through green fees alone, and almost never on the timeline anyone pictures while standing on that clubhouse veranda, admiring the view they just paid millions of dollars to create. The romance of golf course ownership is real. The economics underneath it are unforgiving. The owners who actually thrive are the ones who understood, going in, that the fairways were never going to be the business. They were always just the reason people showed up.